Welcome. My name is Eric Hayes. I know many of you, so hello to many of you. I'm here with Beth Wynstra, and we're very excited to be presenting a discussion of Eugene O'Neill's play, The First Man, which I was talking to Beth earlier, and I was saying this, hey, I think, this is a discussion of The First Man as a preview for a production of The First Man, which may be, who knows, the first one in 100 years. We don't know. We'll talk a little bit about the production history when we get into this. But I just wanted to say that our plan for tonight, and thank you for joining us for this hour, is to start with Beth and I are teaming up again, as we did with Beyond the Horizon and more recently Welded, to work on this upcoming production of The First Man. And we would like to share with you some of the history, some of the context and the issues within the play. Also, a dramaturg's take on some of the main themes, and a director's take on, tackling a production of the play. And one thing I want to just remind you or let you know is that Beth and I are a two-person show here. We are our own tech support, so please be patient with us as we try to admit people or field questions. And actually, that was the next thing I wanted to say, which is that we want to encourage you during the presentation, if you have some ideas that you would like to share, either a comment on the discussion or the play itself, or a question, we'd love to engage you. We plan to talk for about 35 or 40 minutes, and then hopefully turn everything over to an engagement with the collective knowledge and imagination of all of you regarding this play and some of the ideas and themes with this play. So anyway, with that in mind, I'd like to turn things over to Beth Wynstra to talk a little bit about the play and the history of the play.
Great. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Eric. I am so thrilled to be teaming up with you again and looking forward to the January performance of The First Man. So we wanted to, like Eric mentioned, start out with just a very brief synopsis of the play. Eric and I are conscious that we don't, want to reveal everything in this talk, that we want to keep some drama for January. So, but here is just a brief synopsis if you have never read The First Man or if it's been a long time for you. So, following the tragic death of their two young daughters, Martha and Curtis Jason have made a pact to never have any more children. For 10 years, they have thrown themselves into anthropological field trips around the world, but having finally returned home to Connecticut, they find themselves suffocated by provincial life and the small town nature of the Jason family. Further complicating matters is the family's belief that Martha is having an affair with Curtis's best friend, Edward Bigelow. So on the eve of Martha's 39th birthday, as she longs for another child, Curtis plans to embark on their most ambitious expedition yet, an arduous 5-year mission to search for the origin of man known as the missing link. So that is a little synopsis of the play. Some history about the production, its first production. So The First Man was produced initially on March 4th, 1922 at the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York. And to give some context production-wise, it is sandwiched between a production of O'Neill's The Straw, which came a year earlier, November 1921. And then the next play after The First Man will actually come just 5 days later, and that is The Hairy Ape. It'll be produced 5 days later on March 9th, 1922. For those of you who were fortunate to see Eric's brilliant production of Welded last year, which we'll talk a little bit about, that play Welded comes almost exactly 2 years after The First Man. Something to note about the first production of The First Man, which I find really fascinating, is that the main character, one of the main characters, Martha, who in the script is 39 years old, and women might recognize that that is a very, fragile age, that you're nearing 40, but in the 1922 production, she was rewritten to be 34. Because I guess 39 was just too ancient for audiences at that time. And so theater critic Kenneth McGowan said that that was very jarring because a lot of the commentary about her advancing age didn't work very well with that rewrite to 34. Some compelling biographical connections with The First Man. The very day The First Man premiered in 1922 was actually the day that the train carrying Ella O'Neill's body, and Ella O'Neill was Eugene O'Neill's mother. So the train carrying her dead body from California to New York left the very day that The First Man premiered. And that train arrived in New York 5 days later, so it would arrive the day of the premiere of The Hairy Ape. Many of you know that Jamie O'Neill, Eugene O'Neill's brother, was accompanying his mother's body, and his drunken experiences on that train journey would be depicted later by Eugene O'Neill in A Moon for the Misbegotten. One other kind of biographical connection I'll mention, Louis Schaefer, one of Eugene O'Neill's biographers, points out that this play, The First Man, is largely regarded as O'Neill's own struggle with fatherhood and the birth of his son, Shane. But actually, in November 1919, just as O'Neill was starting to write The First Man, Ella O'Neill wrote her son a letter expressing her joy at being a grandmother. And she details in the letter the difficulty of Eugene's birth and how he was an 11-pound baby. Well, the baby in The First Man is also 11 pounds. And I'm going to stop there, and I will detail some more connections between Eugene O'Neill as an infant and the infant in The First Man after our post-show discussion in January. So to wrap up, as I think Eric said, we could find no information about later 20th century productions of The First Man, but we did find two very notable 21st century productions of the play. Both were highly regarded, highly lauded by critics, and they were both in Europe. There was a 2004 production in Dublin, and then there was a 2015 West End production in London at the Jermyn Street Theatre. And this 2015 production was celebrated by critics. It was called a gem of a play by the Gay Times. The London Theatre Review said, quote, "It gives much food for thought on the origin, meaning, and purpose of life." And the artistic team of that London production actually produced a film version of it. And you can watch a very compelling trailer for that film online. Right, Eric?
Oh, yeah.
I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Well, one thing I thought would be useful for everyone is I just thought I would give a quick rundown of the cast of characters and the scene breakdown. And I basically am doing this just because I know that as Beth and I talk about the play, we might start slipping in names of characters, and you will have maybe no way of tracking who any of these people are. So I thought I'd give you a fighting chance by at least having you hear the names once. And this is the cast of characters as written, not necessarily as will be performed, and I can get into that a little bit later. But the cast of characters, Curtis Jason, who is our anthropologist, his wife, Martha, John Jason, Curtis's father and a banker, John Jr., his brother, Richard, his brother, Esther, who is also known as Mrs. Mark Sheffield, his sister, Lily, his sister, Mrs. Davidson, his father's aunt, Mark Sheffield, a lawyer who's married to Esther, Emily, John Jr.'s wife, Edward Bigelow, who is the family, or well, actually, I shouldn't say family friend. He's the friend of Curtis, not the family. A maid and a trained nurse. And basically, the entire action of the play, it happens in Curtis's and Martha's home in Bridgetown, Connecticut, which I have to say, having gone to New London this last summer, there's no mistaking in my mind that this play is some kind of searing indictment to New London, Connecticut. And if O'Neill could have gotten the town council of New London in a room and thrown flaming gold at them, I'm sure he would have. But anyway, just to give you that's a rundown. And as I said, later on, I will discuss how I'm dealing with that casting and those assignments, because I'm taking a little bit different tact than what's written. But anyway, I'd like to turn things over to Beth. And since she was interested in this play first, I thought it would be interesting if she would talk about what drew her to this play, and then I can carry on from there.
Yes, yes. So, well, the first man, as probably many O'Neillians on this call, this Zoom know, is not one of his more produced plays, or maybe highly regarded works. But I have written about this play in my book about marriages in O'Neill's works. And I am very interested in the marriage between Curtis and Martha, because I see it at the same time as both distinct in the many marriages that occupy O'Neill's plays, but also having some of the patterns and some of the familiar elements that we see in a lot of the relationships. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. So I was working on the edits on my section on the first man for my book, and I sent Eric, I think, an email, and I said, would you ever be interested in working on this play? I think that there are some really compelling facets to it. And so as memory serves, Eric, I was out in California at the end of the summer, and we had a meeting. And Eric, being the brilliant director and brave director that he is, he listened to my talking on and on about the play and how a lot of the work that we had done together on Welded, I was seeing great parallels and connections to elements in the first man. So I remember this, Eric, that you sat, you listened patiently, and then you were quiet for a few moments. And then you stuck out your hand and you said, let's do this. And so it was like a lovely moment. And I'm going to really embarrass you now, Eric, because this is the text that you sent to me the next day. You don't even remember this. You said, happy to have a new mountain to climb and you on the expedition. So lovely first man type language. And then Eric gave me this long list of like dramaturgical assignments he needed me to complete, after just hearing about it the day before. So that's kind of how we got into it. Is that what you remember, Eric? Or am I misremembering?
Yeah, no, I don't remember. I didn't remember the text, but that sounds like something I would have thought of. I think, I definitely think of this play as a mountain to climb. And I guess if I was going to describe what drew me to it was obviously Beth Wynstra, I guess. I mean, I've read the play, I've read the play 2 or 3 times over the years, and I've never had a very strong desire to direct it. And I think the combination of having directed many other O'Neill plays as kind of, there's a residual effect where now when I revisit a play that I didn't think I could do, I start thinking like, oh, well, why don't I apply this idea that I learned working on this other play to this play and see what I can do. And all of a sudden I just start to see the play in front of me, where previously I couldn't relate to it. I couldn't see it as a director. And then there's an element of, Beth, I think you quietly challenge me. You don't say it in so many words, but you're like, I wonder if you could do this one. And I have to at least go, okay, I got to read the play and see if, what I think. And I would say off that, I mean, just to talk about one big, huge issue, and probably the first thing I would have said to Beth in talking about it seriously, I said, okay, so here's my assessment of what I like about the play, and here's what I think needs to be worked on or adjusted or fixed or something. And Beth, I'm throwing it back to you a little bit here, but I'm sure you were drawn, and especially in your book, and which I haven't read it, but the character of Martha is, I had no issue with Martha as I read it. I was like, oh, she totally makes sense to me. She has compelling point of view. She articulates what she wants and needs well. She can give as good as she can get. She really is a capable character. And I could understand you, Beth, being drawn to writing about a character like Martha. But on the flip side, the biggest challenge of the play is dealing, and I think anyone, if they've read the play, would recognize this, is how do you deal with the Curtis character? Because Curtis, when the script, so to speak, to use language from Welded, changes, and Martha wants to have a baby, Curtis does not handle it well. He really handles it very poorly. And I have no problem saying that one of my strategies for approaching this play is to figure out how to minimize some of the lines and some of the language and some of the kind of difficult emotional reactions Curtis displays within the script. I mean, I'm not changing who he is. He still is who he is, but how do I keep the audience engaged with him, since, he's there, he's a primary part of this play, the whole play. And so I need to, figure out a way to not have everyone tune out on him at some point and just not care anymore. And I hope, my goal or my hope is that by some good acting choices, and some judicious editing, and also I will say, I'll just share with this that one thing that made the play work for me, or at least I started to see it, was I started really thinking about Kurt's situation and some of the other characters in the play, not only the overbearing family, but his very close relationship to Edward Bigelow. And I started going, okay, I can see some other things going on with him that might motivate why he doesn't handle things very well. And that got me intrigued. I started seeing levels and layers in the script that maybe previously, whenever I read it, I didn't see. And so that's part of the reason I engaged. And that's why we're doing it in January.
And I think in that same spirit, Eric, of layers and digging and trying to build some background and experiences for these characters. You and I've kind of thought of, like, amongst others, but we're kind of thinking about 4 main themes that I'm hoping can kind of guide our discussion tonight. And those are the idea of becoming or evolving. So how does evolving work in the play? What characters do evolve? What is the catalyst for such evolution? Who does not evolve? The idea about choices, who gets to make choices? In what ways do things like gender, family, societal expectations, traditions intrude on the way that people make choices or can make choices? We have something that we're calling self in context, which I think really gets to what Eric is saying, that how does a person's experiences or childhood or place they grew up impact the way that they move in the world, the way that they behave? And then lastly, strategies for survival. So, how do we survive in a town like the one featured in the play? So I think you can hear in some of these themes, this notions of naturalism, certainly that we see evident in the play, where it becomes difficult for characters to evolve or fully reject or move away from where they came from. We're thinking particularly Kurt and members of the Jason family. But Eric and I are really interested in these ideas of evolving and becoming. And as I mentioned earlier, my first interest in this play was the marital relationship between Curtis and Martha. And this is a couple that's devoted to one another. They love each other deeply. And when we first encounter them, they are seemingly, partners in every respect, partners in love, partners in research and work, and partners in a marriage that is definitely different from the more conventional ones that surround them in Bridgeport. So those of you who know Welded and the work that Eric did last year will see, I think, a familiar dynamic in The First Man. A couple trying to be modern and bucking societal expectations and gender roles, but only to find that those things are really hard to uphold in a partnership. So The First Man, really difficulty comes, as Eric mentioned, when Martha, who had agreed to the pact to not have children, finds out that she's pregnant. And to add on to that, is joyfully excited that she is pregnant. The partnership that Kurt thought he understood and could uphold, and that frankly really benefited him and his work, shifts in an instant with Martha's news. And Martha's change of course is really kind of what it will ignite the central tragedy in the play. So as Eric also mentioned, Martha is a character attuned to the change of dynamic in the marriage due to her veering away from what the couple initially agreed to. And I'm going to state this, and I really believe it, that I think Martha has the most beautiful line about love and partnership and the profound nature of marriage in any of O'Neill's plays. So I'm giving it to Martha. I think this line is really remarkable. She says to Curtis, "We must, both of us, relearn to love and respect what we have become." So this idea that a couple grows and changes after saying I do, that they don't just kind of stay in an amber state all the way through, was revolutionary. It was not a sentiment, I think, expressed or believed by other O'Neill married characters, or probably by individuals even off the stage in early 20th century America, where, an adherence to certain roles and set expectations for marriage is really an antithesis to growth and evolution. I also see in Martha's quote very contemporary thinking. This notion of evolving or becoming has become a big way of how we now think about and discuss relationships and our own narratives. And Eric has heard me say this a million times, but whenever I hear that word becoming, I instantly think of Michelle Obama's autobiography, which was titled Becoming. And speaking of Michelle Obama, it's like she knew we were, producing this play. Just last week, she had a lovely Instagram post because she's promoting a new book. And she wrote about her marriage to someone, that I think most of us know, but her marriage. So this is what she writes. "But here's the thing. Our marriage has never been perfectly 50-50. One of us is always needing more or giving more. We have to be willing to listen to each other honestly and without defensiveness. Only then can we evolve together." So when I saw that, I had to quickly screenshot it and send it to Eric. Here is Martha, right? Many, 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 many years later. But this idea that yes, couples change and grow, and that needs to be part of the marital contract. Martha knew it, and I don't think certainly Curtis was aware. So I'll pause there, Eric, if you want to talk more about evolving and things like that you're thinking of.
Well, yeah, well, one thing that Beth and I have talked about a lot lately is the idea of the social scripts. And I think it fits sort of the evolving theme to think about when somebody is trying to break from a social script. And clearly, the family, the Jason family, and the family in the town are synonymous. In fact, there's a line from the father, Jason, something along the lines of, talking about the town, but saying you'll get used to us, and like as if the family is the town, and that's kind of reflected in their viewpoint. They are, they're the respectable pillars of the community. They're all bankers and lawyers and probably politicians, and in the play, you have the Curtis, the son, who's become an anthropologist, and I would say he's kind of, he's definitely the O'Neill figure. In this case, it's not he's not a poet per se. He's interested in fossils, but even his friend Bigelow jokes that he has a romance with rocks, and he's a romantic at heart, and he does fit also that sort of tortured poet, highly emotional, highly idealistic. He is like Michael Cape in Welded, or many characters in many O'Neill plays. It's very easy to see that he is that figure. He is the poet amongst a family of bankers, so to speak, even though he's an anthropologist. And he wants to break free. I mean, again, that's also maybe part of the poet aspect to him. He wants to break free. And I think one of the issues, among other things, is besides when Martha's pregnant and wants the baby, not only is it put it really affects his plans for them, basically, but it also in some ways it's like she's flipped over, she's flipped the script, and she's actually becoming part of the family in his mind, I think, in a way that he rejects. Oh, we're going to just be bourgeois, live at home, respectable people. We're not going to be adventurers anymore. We're going to have a little family and do what everyone else in my family does. And he's trying to individuate from his family. But I also think it's very interesting that he carries within him the rigidity of his family, because he has a script with he and Martha and their marriage. And when she wants to break from that script, he does not handle it well at all. So he's really, in many ways, I mean, it's in one way I think about it is I think about how Eugene O'Neill had such a great desire to change theater from the theater of his father, and yet wrote such melodramatic material. So you can't totally change who you are. It's in you. And it's definitely in the role of Curtis. He carries his family, even though he's trying to push back and emancipate himself and individuate the entire play, basically.
Yeah, I would say too, such great points, Eric. And it's interesting that Kurt, before he was an anthropologist, right? A lot is made in the beginning of the play that he had several careers, right? He was a geological engineer and then a geologist, and that he was almost allowed to evolve, right? Change course, change his mind, and yet he can't offer similar thinking to Martha, right? And I'm thinking too in your comments also about Lily, who is Curtis's younger sister, and who throughout most of the play is this very outspoken kind of rebel figure. She's not going to get married. She's not going to be a part of this kind of community, only for something very different kind of to happen towards the end, which I won't reveal. But she is also a figure that I think embodies those ideas of it's really hard to break free of where you came from and what you have grown up around, what you have seen. It's really difficult to break away from those things.
Yeah, I would add about Lily. I do think she's one of the more interesting characters in the play, and she's kind of a wild card. I think she has her own agenda. she too, she talks a good game about wanting to individuate, wanting to break free. And yet she also often throws in little comments and things that indicates that she recognizes, she knows, she knows where she's from, and she knows that she probably will, she become the enemy, watch out, I might become the enemy. And I think she kind of, the writing's on the wall that she knows she's more entangled with the family than she would want to be seen as. She since the play was written in the early 20s, I see her as a quintessential sort of flapper. I feel like she's all about outrage and stimulation. I'm really struck by, she learns something in confidence from one character and they leave the room and she can't wait to tell the other people about it, just because I think, not because it's just like keeping a confidence is less important than getting stimulated by saying something to somebody else and getting them all worked up about something, so she's really interesting that way, and very outrageous, I think, actually.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm thrilled. Are we allowed to say who's going to be playing her in your production?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So the incredible Adrienne Dean, who was Eleanor in Welded, who I think will just do a magnificent job in that role as Lily. I'm really excited to see her and work with her. So Eric, I this is going to be kind of maybe a time for you to discuss some of your directorial choices and what you're thinking about, but if we're moving to this like big idea about choices and how characters make choices, I'm thinking very much about the anxiety that the Jason family seems to feel with anything new. We will talk, I think, in a little bit about kind of the intrusive figure of Martha coming from the Wild West. Anything from California is suspect and dangerous in this New England town. But the anxiety, the pressures that Kurt and other people feel around the way of always doing things is the right way to do things, and any deterring from that is scary. So, and I think that a lot of that anxiety then manifests itself in the gossip, in the disparaging of the marriage of Martha and Kurt, in the disparaging of Edward Bigelow, who we need to discuss. But do you want to talk a little bit of what you're thinking about with staging some of that anxiety that the family feels with change and intrusions on their way of thinking and their way of life?
Yes, I will. One way I've described to Beth the way I see the Jason family is a hydra. And while I'm not thinking literally of a hydra, I can't help but think that it might inform some of the staging. I do think that in many ways they are. I will say this about almost any O'Neill play: if I can find a way to be expressionistic, I will choose to do that. And I find that basically any play that has heightened emotion, and go ahead, try to name an O'Neill play that doesn't have heightened emotion, is good fodder for at least exploring expressionistic possibilities. And so one thing I'm thinking about is ways in which through maybe the repetition of a line or the way I stage the family, I can show how they function as a group on stage. And I'm really interested in that. They bicker among themselves, but ultimately they're always very uniform. And it's very clear, as Beth was just indicating, they have a big problem with anyone who's an outsider. And Martha is an outsider. She's actually has a history that's tied to Nevada. And Nevada. They see that as heathen as you can be. And it's kind of funny. I was sharing with Beth that even in my own family's history, that there's a little bit of this. If I go back a couple generations in my family, there was a family member, my great grandfather was great grandfather was basically ostracized from his respectable family back on the East Coast because he went off to Nevada and he married a Nevada girl. and they just thought, oh, we don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. You must be from, the back country now. And that's kind of at work at this play as well, that they, although Martha, what's nice is that O'Neill gives Martha a real great voice in this play. She's up for it. I mean, she doesn't want to fight the family, but she gets her say in. She calls them out when she notices what they're doing. Right. She can give as good as she gets. And that's so she's a fighter. And it's nice. It's a nice aspect to the play.
Yes. And it's, I said this to you, Eric, that if I was teaching The First Man, I would pair it with a wonderful song by Taylor Swift. And I know I have some Swifties here on this call, right, Eric? But she has this great song. I highly recommend it. It's called The Last Great American Dynasty, in which she actually depicts a true life story of a woman named Rebecca Harkness, who was a divorcee who married into the Standard Oil money. She married William Hale Harkness in the 40s. And they moved to Westerly, Rhode Island, which is, those of you in New England know, a very rich seaside town. And the town was aghast that this middle-class divorcee was now part of their society. And Rebecca's husband died after 6 years, and the town speculated that she must have been the cause, those wild parties they were throwing at the house. And what's lovely is Taylor Swift details all these true things of the outsider, the ridicule, the scorn she got. And then in real life, Taylor Swift ended up buying that house, that of the Harknesses, which I love. But in any case, this kind of repetition of the woman outsider intruding on tradition, heritage, family, upper class values, is one that certainly runs through American literature in all kinds of ways. So I like that O'Neill is playing with this. And what we've talked about, Eric, is that what's sad is that is the context that the family kind of grafts on to Martha, and she really can't ever do anything to get out of that. You and I were talking about in the call when they get the news that she's pregnant and she must be having a boy, right? They just decide that without really knowing, but that their joy is very short-lived, and then it quickly turns to, oh, there must have been a scandal. The months don't add up of when Kurt was gone. She must have had this adulterous affair with Edward Bigelow. So, they can't, even like a pregnancy, which in some way should bring her into what they know and the script and the role that she is supposed to play, that doesn't even last very long, right? That she is, quickly turned again as a heathen from the West.
Right. Yeah. As we were talking earlier, it takes less than 2 pages to go from, oh, she's going to have a child and maybe make Kurt, get Kurt to join us in respectable society. And within 2 pages, oh no, she's having an affair with the friend and it's a scandal. And yes. Yeah. And it's like almost a feeding frenzy. And I think obviously it's very clear when you read their lines that they have a bias. There's just a natural, sort of inbred bias against her, and they do collectively seek to keep her on the outside. That's and not right. Let her be part of the group. And of course, maybe
before we end, which might be another character that we should mention, because I know he looms largely in the play and for your production, but Edward Bigelow, with the best friend, is, I think, in a similar scenario, right? In that he proves himself to be a family man, a loving father, devoted to his children, but that the family only sees him for past actions, that he cannot move out of this context for them of philanderer, womanizer, what have you, right? So it's a similar dynamic.
Right. It's another script they've written. Yes. They wrote a script. He apparently carried on. I was saying earlier to Beth that I was noting that in this play, the family, Lily in particular, brings a message from the family to Martha saying, "Stay away from Bigelow. He's bad news." and noting that in some of the exposition at the start of the play between Curtis and his friend Edward, they talk about how the family used to write letters that basically must have said something along the lines of, Curtis, stay away from Edward Bigelow. So it's clear that no matter what Edward does, and he does within the play itself, he seems to have been a fairly reformed character. He's very devoted to his children in particular, which they should really think is a wonderful thing, but they don't. They keep the old script and the old perceptions and the bias. For some reason, the bias serves their purposes more than accepting him in as part of the community, and that just kind of goes to the sort of exclusivity. The family seeing itself as just better than everyone else that doesn't fit with their idea of what should be. So, one thing that kind of touches on it, I as a director, I'm kind of really wanting to emphasize the patriarchy and gender roles in the play. And one of the things that I am doing, because I've already cast the play, is I've reduced the cast from 13 to 9. And basically, I eliminated the two small roles, the nurse and the maid. But what I did is I wanted to emphasize the maleness and the traditionalness of the family. And so I actually absorbed the sisters, the married couples merged into one character that will go under the name of the man. So basically, it's like a bunch of old men. I almost think of this as like the chorus of Greek senators or something. And they're pitted against Martha, as if they are knowledge, they are respectable. She doesn't fit in. She's not one of us. And I feel like I'm interested in exploring how that kind of, I think it's interesting. It will amplify sort of how the maleness is the default for the acceptable power structure, I should say. But it also is interesting because the sisters in the family, besides Lily, it's interesting to have, I imagine, have a male actor say things like, "Oh, I had trouble with my two children when they were small also." And I just thought, okay, well, let's put that in the mouth of a male actor and just see what that's like. So I'm very interested in playing with the gender. I will say, actually, in one case, I cast a woman as, although she will go under a male name, I cast a woman as one of the
Sheffield, right?
Sheffield, yeah. But she's really Sheffield / Esther. She's basically represents the married couple. But in this case, it's an actor named Cynthia Lazinski, who is very no nonsense. And I thought, okay, that might be another way to put a wrinkle in this, is I'm going to have this kind of no nonsense, no bullshit lawyer voice coming from a female actor. So I'm just really interested in playing around with the gender roles within the play and the dynamics of a group versus the individual.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think we're at 9:45. Time flies when we're talking about First Man. So I think we would love to open it up if you want to put comments. And I already saw some great comments in the chat, but if people have questions or comments that they want to put in there, we really would love to hear your thoughts or questions for Eric about directing this play. We're all ears. Well, while we're waiting, I couldn't fit this in, but Eric, I have to mention, you said this to me so long ago, and this example just stayed with me. Thinking about Kurt and his desires to break away from his family and the rigidity and whatever their rules, and he's going to have this new marriage, and Martha's really different, and that yet he kind of is also then enforcing his rules and his rigidity in this world. And I remember you described this as, we all know that junior high schooler who wants to, break away from his strict family and will go and join the goth group only to enforce a lot of rules and structure with this new group. So I think O'Neill is playing with something that's quite familiar for us. Bess, are you going to give your question live? Yay!
I am, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone.
That's okay.
Hi, Bess.
Thank you for that wonderful launch discussion. I have so many questions about this play because it's so strange in this really wonderful way, I think. But the thing that really struck me, I looked at it again before this, because I feel like tonally, it does this thing that something like Beyond the Horizon also does, where it starts and you don't know it's a tragedy at the beginning, right? And I think that sometimes happens with O'Neill, but a lot of times you kind of know that it's not going great for them. But at the beginning here, we've got almost like an Indiana Jones-esque kind of night at the museum. I like you have this moment where you're not sure if you're going to watch like a great romantic comedy about this, this archaeologist, anthropologist who's going to find these things. So I'm wondering if you can describe, like, to you, the arc of the play, how that's functioning, where you see the turns start to happen, if you intend to kind of plant that seed very early, or if you want that to be a surprise. Without giving too much away, I'm just kind of curious of how you're thinking of it overall.
That's great, Beth. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say with most things, I try to, I think I want to play the moment. I like to let people indulge where they think it is, and then have these pivotal moments of discovery in which it sends things into a different trajectory. So I like to think, for instance, that in Act 1, you have a fairly unified front in the couple, and the family is kind of but the family, I think you're right. It's funny to think of it as almost a comedy, but in the sense that I think that the family and their they don't get to an insidious level at the start. They're just kind of annoying. They're kind of the annoying family, the cloying family. But we'll get through them. It's like just getting through a holiday with some family you don't want to, and then we'll get back to our own little ecosystem. And then, but O'Neill does a really good job of planting all the seeds in Act 1, so that bombs start to get dropped. You have the Lily character who can't help herself but say things to people that, of course, will snowball into other things. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think it starts to take a really different turn in Act 2, when it really focuses on it was a unified front against the larger social group of the family, and now it's dissension within the actual marriage itself. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I think some of the most poignant writing is in that, as Beth has already said. Martha really knows how to articulate her point of view, and I think that she really brings a poignancy to Act 2. That change. I think that changes things. That clearly changes things. And then, as we're trying not to get too far into the play with everyone, but then things change a lot in the next act again, and I think that that's interesting. And then I think by Act 4, you're like, oh, well, what are they going to do with everything that happened up to this point? So, yeah. Oh, I will say one thing that's interesting. Again, I mentioned that I was interested in the genders of the play, and I think it's I'm willing to give a little something away, in that there is a baby, that is handed off to somebody at the end of the play. Traditionally, it's written as an old woman, and I think it's interesting that it's going to be played by an older man. And the idea that you're going to hand the baby to be, guarded and taken care of to an older man, and I think that that's just kind of puts an interesting wrinkle into what that dynamic is going to be like.
I just will add one thing that, Beth, your question got me thinking about, and we ran out of time. Eric and I we had been talking about so many actually parallels to the Hairy Ape, which again will open 5 days later. But your question made me think of those of us who have taught the Hairy Ape to undergrads. I always love asking my students at the end of Act 2, after, we have the Mildred, what is that? Scene 3, when Mildred and Yank see each other. I always say to my students, what did you believe was going to happen at the end of the play? And so many of them will say, I thought they were going to get together, that they were going to marry each other, and it's going to be, and Yank was going to be this big successful corporate guy. I mean, I do teach at a business college, so that might be part of it, but that wanting it to be something that it is not, and that it really starts to change quickly. And that, and then, Eric and I were talking too about notions of belonging, which Eric, you talked about versus wanting to individuate is really apparent in both plays. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add. We have a question from our esteemed president, Katie Johnson. Katie, are you there? I don't know if you can. Hi, Katie.
Hi. Oh my gosh, Beth and Eric, this sounds so incredible. I love how you're thinking about this project and a play that is sort of new to me. So I'm having all kinds of thoughts about it. And Eric, especially your comment about handing off the baby at the end, I couldn't help but thinking about the almost expressionistic ending of The Web.
Yes.
When the policeman takes the baby and says, "I'm your mama now," which is, like really grotesque and elephantine. I think O'Neill uses that word, but so I'm having all kinds of thoughts and connections. But what I wanted to ask you, kind of related to that, but also, thinking 5 days after this Harry Ape opens, to think about this play kind of being bracketed by probably two of O'Neill's most significant expressionistic plays. So The Emperor Jones, 1920, and he wrote The First Man in 1920. And then Harry Ape is coming up. So given, Eric, and you were saying that whenever you have a chance to heighten expressionism, you'll go for it. Do you know yet what you might emphasize in this play? And Beth, were there things that jumped out to you as dramaturg?
I would say that especially when Kurt, who is always in this highly emotional state, is sort of pitted against his family. There's a sequence later in the play in which they're basically putting him on trial. I've even made a little note that this is the trial scene, and it's really the family against him, and so I'm very interested in trying to heighten his experience of what's going on, whether it's vocally. One thing when I directed the Harry Ape many years ago, and one of the things that was a discovery for me was, the entry into expressionism in the Harry Ape is, I believe, in Act 4, when all the guys in the forecastle start talking in unison. And to me, it was like, oh, I get it. It's like this is what's going on in Yank's head. He's now hears all of them uniformly. They're all kind of saying the same thing to him. Well, I kind of think I might play with that idea of Kurt hearing the same thing from his family, and I also just think that there's a way of probably physicalizing. Even though this is a script in hand performance, I still block things. I will look for some ways to stylize the family's movement as they sort of basically. It's kind of like Jason fighting the Hydra in some ways. And I think the family is the Hydra, and in some ways. And so I'll be interested in finding physicalized ways to pit the individual against the group at that time.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I mean, this just echoes Eric. Eric has helped me really see this play as having expressionistic possibilities, and the timing of it, where it is in O'Neill's timeline of work, further supports, I think, these choices. But I believe I'm right. Scholars might be correcting me, but I think this is the first play in which O'Neill is looking back and getting a story from ancient texts, Jason and the Golden Fleece. I think I'm right on that. I might stand to be corrected. But if I look ahead to say something like Morning Becomes Electra, which of course is really borrowing from the ancient texts, there are some of the things that Eric is mentioning, these, the individual versus the group, some of the expressionistic elements with masking and, those kinds of things that we know are coming down the road. And so it's fun to think about those things at play in this work. And the Hydra has become a big element for I think for both of us, and and thinking about family and influence and those societal standards, which I think for a lot of us do feel like voices in our heads and something that we're always carrying on us, in an expressionistic way. So I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Steve Bloom, I know you. Hi, Steve.
Hi guys. This is thanks for doing this. This question is it could follow up on Katie's, because the answer may lie in expressionism, but I wonder if Eric, if you're, or either of you, if you're ready and willing to talk about the screaming, and how you might handle that and what you think about that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll say something. I'll say something. Yeah, I'll say something about that. I think I can say it without being totally conclusive. I've already mentioned there's a baby, so it's not an easy birth, and O'Neill calls for a lot of offstage distress and moaning and pain, being portrayed, and it is one of the things that when I looked at the play at first, I was like, oh, I really have to figure out how much an audience can handle, because I think to be true to the situation, the audience should be uncomfortable. But again, you don't want people to be so uncomfortable that they tune out. So it's a balancing act. And I don't have a test audience. It's not like we'll have a series of previews where I can try this out on people. But I do imagine that, we will make an effort to portray the distress that Martha is experiencing, which is supposed to happen off stage, and it will happen off stage. But trying to strike the right balance. And I think I'm going to have to, I'll probably be looking around reading the other actors' faces to see what they can handle, because, but it does serve the story well. I think it's an important, part of the story, and it does help explain some of what goes on with Kurt in the play. Some of his attitudes and actions are informed by that whole distressful situation. So if the audience doesn't experience any distress, I think they'd have a harder time relating to what Kurt's going through. So I'll be trying to strike a certain balance with that.
And I'll just mention too, and I see, thank you, Bess, for commenting, but Bess Rowan, who is, if you do not know, has written a brilliant book about stage directions, and she focuses quite a bit on O'Neill. And Bess is going to be one of our scholars. We're going to be featuring a group of scholars who will be talking about elements in The First Man. They'll be recording videos, which will be on the Eugene O'Neill Foundation website. And Bess is going to talk about the stage directions and those off-stage labor noises. So thank you, Bess. Just the assignment you wanted, Bess. And I think we have a question from Alex Pettit. Hi, Alex.
Hey, folks, how you doing?
Great.
Look, a question about something is becoming increasingly obvious to me, and frankly, is the cause of some concern. I'm not convinced that Eric is interested only in staging plays that have highly theatrical scenes on or featuring staircases. As someone who really loves Eric, this concerns me, because I think it might represent some strange sort of psychosis. So I'm wondering, Eric, if you have any way to account for this apparent eccentricity. Otherwise, I just want to thank you both so much for an absolutely wonderful talk.
Oh, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Eric, where's the staircase?
Oh, no, yeah, we're going with tunnel imagery in this one. No staircase. So no, it's in the play. Technically, I think she's upstairs, but it doesn't, since it's all off stage. I don't have it's not a visual I'm going to go for, I don't think. But I do see we have a question in the chat that I basically talking about Kaylin, and hi Kaylin, has joined us, basically asking about the reviews, talking about the clunky exposition, and I would say, I would say, like with many of O'Neill's plays, my instinct is if I can find a way to get the actors to show something, I'll have them show it, and so they don't have to explain it. So in this case, is no different. I'll seek to have them, show what they're, and no need to say more than needs to be said. I think that's, I see you now. Is there anything you want to follow up with on your question?
Well, I mean, it was just sort of a general question. Am I hearing it or reading it wrong, or is there a lot of exposition in his work?
Yes, you're not
Okay.
wrong. And that is a common critique.
Okay.
And it's interesting that the play that Eric and I worked on together last year, Welded, also shares that's a complaint or criticism of that play as well.
Okay.
But this is where, when you have a brilliant director like Eric, who can figure out those creative, compelling ways to reduce that exposition so that we're getting right into the action. That's what you need.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
or in this case, I recognize you have to have a certain degree of exposition, just because otherwise there's no context.
Yeah.
But for instance, in this play, a lot of the exposition comes in the form of the friend teasing Curtis. And so he's kind of making a big show of recounting Curtis's past to the wife. But I think it, besides reducing some of it, I also think it's effective to motivate it as he's not just saying these things to say things. He's saying things because he's trying to tease his friend and get his goat a bit. And I hope the actor can convey that, and so it won't be tedious or clunkier than it needs to be.
Thanks. I appreciate your thoughts.
Sure.
Well, I think we're out of time, but I'll just say my goodbye before I'll turn it back to Eric. So thank you all so much. Those of you who are in the Bay Area or not, if you would like to travel early January for our production in Danville. But again, we'll be sending out information about those scholar videos that will be posted on the website and anything else. But Eric, thank you all. And Eric, I'll turn it to you.
I just want to say, add to that our production will happen at the Museum of the San Ramon Valley in Danville, September 13th. I'm not September. I'm so festival of the brain. January 13th, 14th, and 15th, and we're really excited about doing this play, and we're really happy to have this event and have it at a time that hopefully was late enough for people out here on the West Coast, but still early enough that we could be joined on the East Coast. And from seeing everyone that joined us, it sounds like we struck a good balance and got a good mixture of you. So just thank you very much for all joining us, and hope to engage with you again soon. Thank you.